Hey guys, welcome back to Bible Studies for Life. Hey, today we are starting the fall series. This is the first lesson in the fall series of Bible Studies for Life. Lifeway resource, you can get an ebook online at lifeway.com, or you can order hard copy and do what I do, and you just highlight like crazy and write notes and all kinds of stuff in there. Anyways, we are going to be in the book of James today. James 1 through 12 is where we're going to be at. You guys want to go ahead and turn there. Today's lesson is called Faith on Display in Hard Times. Now, our faith is going to be tested if it hasn't been tested at some point already. And then other people are going to see that, especially not just in the good times, but as the lesson says, in the hard times. Hey, let's start with a question. As we always do from our study, it says, what's an important lesson that you have learned? Oh man, what is a very important lesson that you have learned at some point in your life, right? And just keep that in mind. Why is that important? Who taught you that lesson? How has it changed things for you over time, right? Now, how about don't play with fire, right? Or don't eat yellow snow. Maybe you've heard that one. Maybe don't poke the bear. Important lessons that you've learned, right? Listen to this quote from our study today. It's a one-line takeaway from our study, if you would. It says, when we work together with other believers and persist in our faith through trials, God strengthens and matures our faith. Okay, now there's a great link to a video on YouTube that I want to encourage you guys to watch. It's listed within our study there. But for us, we're going to move on and remember this right here. God uses trials to mature our faith. Who does that? God does. And what is He doing? He's using the trials in our lives, right? To do what? To mature our faith. Okay? All that together, one line from our study, that's what we're getting. Let's jump in. Look, because of Jesus, people can live with joy regardless of their circumstances, and as of joy is rooted in an eternal perspective and not an earthly circumstance. Now, I don't know if you caught that or not, but our joy as believers is in an eternal perspective, not the current situation or circumstance that you find yourself in right now on earth. Okay? Look, we live in a world that is under the weight of sin's curse. So we will face all kinds of difficult things. Okay? So we should not be surprised when fiery trials come up. Hello? Now check this out. This MLB Major League Baseball player, Dave Dravicki, found out he had cancer in his pitching arm, right? So then he had surgery, and then they removed the tumor, and then broke his arm just 10 months later after the surgery, right? And he would never pitch again. Now eventually they ended up having to amputate his arm, right? Now Dave was literally living his dream. Can you imagine a little boy growing up in the backyard and I want to be an MLB pitcher, bottom of the ninth, 2 outs, bases loaded, 3-2 count, and now you're living that. You're literally living your dream as an adult. You get cancer. All this is taken away from you, right? And your dreams are gone, right? So this is where this guy was at, right? And Dave was living this dream until he literally lost it all. It's difficult to think about joy in these kinds of circumstances, right? Now, yet James wrote that believers should have joy even in our trials, right? Now, he was not teaching that the trials themselves are something to be happy about, right? No, what he was saying is that even in the toughest of circumstances, joy is available because, our relationship with Jesus. You see, James wrote this letter to address specific problems in the lives of believers. Because of persecution, these Christians were forced to live far from their homeland. Okay? They faced new pressures from the people in their new surroundings, and by urging them to turn to God, He helped them see that their hardships that they faced were used by God to help them grow towards spiritual maturity. So let's dig in. James 1 through 4 is where we're going to start at. Let's read this together. James, a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes dispersed abroad, greetings. Consider it great joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you experience various trials. Verse 3 reads, because you know that the testing of your faith produces endurance. And in verse 4 it says, and let endurance have its full effect, so that you may be mature and complete, lacking nothing. Okay, now what does this mean? James got straight to the point. Didn't waste any time, right? He called his readers and us to face our various trials with great joy. When's the last time you had great joy in anything? Right? I'm going to assume it was not during a trial, right? Maybe it was, but to be a joyful Christian, watch, is not a suggestion, okay? It's a command, and happiness is easy when good things are, what? Happening in our lives, right? But joy is different. It isn't based on circumstances, but upon God's goodness and confidence that He will fulfill His eternal promises. You see, when tough times happen in our lives, it's natural to react, what? Negatively, right? I tell our students that part of your witness is going to be how you either respond or react to a situation that you find yourself in. If you react to it, your witness is probably going to be hurt, right? But if you respond to that circumstance or that situation, others are going to see that and want to know why you responded that way instead of reacting the same way everybody else did, right? Now look, when tough times happen in our lives, it's natural to just be in a negative mood or a situation and just be like, oh man, and we're reacting, right? The human tendency is to respond with anxiety or fear or anger, right? Maybe we find ourselves whining or complaining, or we become edgy with people, right, in our lives, and then we start treating them harshly. You see, out of genuine concern for people in the church, James taught that we need to think about our trials in a unique Christian way. You're not reacting negatively, but choosing to respond with great joy. See, the phrase trials refers to generally the challenges that we are all facing. You see, more specifically, James is addressing trials that believers experience because of persecution for their faith. Now look, Jesus said in this world, when we follow after Him, we will face trouble. Now you're going to see that in John 16:33. And James isn't saying that trials are loads of fun, because they're not. Hello, right? Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, boy, I can't wait to find a new trial today, right? Instead, trials help us know that our faith is real, that it's genuine. Genuine faith helps us to respond well through what happens. You see, God uses trials to strengthen our faith, like a refiner's fire, which burns away impurities and produces pure gold. Trials serve to purify our faith in Christ. Now, the refining activity was not so that people would move from unbelieving to believing. See, James assumed his audience was comprised of believers, so which one of the reasons he referred to them as brothers and sisters, right? The refining activities move faith from an idea, watch, listen, to action. While faith includes correct thinking, it also requires right actions, right? Wow. There's some big stuff happening there, right? Now look, trials can certainly correct our thinking, but James was focusing more on how they correct our living, if that makes sense. You see, trials exposed where our behavior falls short of what we believe, right? Allowing us to live out our faith. Now see, God's ultimate goal is testing us is that our faith becomes mature and complete, okay? So through trials that we experience, He is developing endurance in us. right? As an endurance runner, as a cross-country runner, as a long-distance runner, and anything more than a mile for me is endurance, right? You got to train up to that. You don't just hop out there and run a marathon. You have to train for that. And that is a process. It is a difficult process that you work day in, day out. You even have to eat right. You got to sleep right. You've got to train, right? And you got to do these things, and it leads up to being able to do these things. That mature runner versus that guy like me getting off the couch. Yeah, I'll do a marathon with you, sure. By the 3/4 mile mark, you're begging for water and an ambulance to carry you off because you didn't prepare for it, right? And see, through these trials, listen, don't miss this. We experience, right? He is developing in us that endurance. Now, we sometimes call it perseverance or faithfulness, or steadfastness, but it is God's work of developing our spiritual muscles, if you will, and the resolve to stand firm in our faith. You see, joy in trials is not natural. You see, in fact, it might seem downright ridiculous to most, and from an earthly perspective, it might be, we don't know. Maybe sometimes it can be, right? You see, God has called us to live in ways that don't make sense to the world, though, right? We're not supposed to look like the world. We're supposed to look different, right? And so when we choose to trust Jesus, joy is available even in the hardest times. Now, here's a couple questions to help us dig deeper. Question number 1 from a study: what are some common trials and difficulties we might experience in today's world? And question number 2 says, what benefits do we gain through experiencing trials? How have trials helped you grow in your faith? Now, let's keep reading James 1, 5 through 8. Verse 5, now if any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask, who gives to all generously and ungrudgingly, and it will be given to him. Verse 6, but let him ask in faith without doubting. For the doubter is like the surging sea, driven and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. And verse 8 says, being double-minded and unstable in all your ways. All right, what does all that mean, right? Let's break it down. Steadfastness and perseverance are needed, but they are not enough. Check this out. We also need wisdom, right? Trials might sometimes tempt us to see suffering as punishment for wrongdoing. To make matters worse, our friends might sometimes hint or even outright declare that we deserve the hardship experience that we're going through, right? Now, this is exactly what happened to Job. If you guys remember that, he had 3 friends, right, who, when they heard about this disaster that he had experienced, came to his side to comfort him. We see that in Job 2:11. But then they, They started talking and they blamed Job for his problems. Thanks, guys, right? According to his friends, Job's sufferings were his own fault. He deserved what he was getting. We see that in Job 4 through 25. You see, Job's friends were outspoken with their criticism. However, even in the accusations are more subtle and implied, it can be easy to get the message that suffering is our own fault. You see, the truth is sometimes we suffer because of bad choices that we make, and at times our trials are the result of sinful choices in which God chooses as corrective discipline. Yeah, you heard that right. Read it. Listen to what is being said in our study. Look, but not all trials are God's disciplining us. You see, it takes the wisdom to know the difference. Even when we devote ourselves to obeying God, we will still experience hardship because we live in a broken world which is under the curse of sin. Now look, Jesus said the people of the world were opposed to him. And we can expect opposition and persecution as well, right? They first hated him, so guess what? They're going to hate us, right? Therefore, we should expect it. Even when we follow Jesus, we should know that we're going to face hard times. You see, God had promised to give generously give that wisdom generously, and specifically to understand and to navigate these trials. You see, to those who trust in Him, and for those who ask for it, right? You see, believers don't need to be timid because God has invited us to approach Him boldly, but we must understand that God calls us to ask, have unwavering faith. You see, when people focus too much on the ways of the world, which are consistently changing, right? It's easy to be, as we read, tossed back and forth like a tiny boat in a big storm in the ocean, right? You see, trusting in God and asking in faith requires that we focus on God's unchanging character and not the unstable world. When we ask for wisdom with this kind of faith, we can be assured that He will provide it. You see, God is a generous giver of wisdom. He is faithful, and when we faithfully follow Him, He will give us the wisdom needed to live well through these trials. Here's a couple more questions from our study. Question number 3, how can we know if we lack godly wisdom? It's a big one. Question number 4, what keeps us from seeking God's wisdom when we face trials? Yeah, sometimes it's just easier. God, I got this. I can handle this. I don't need to pray. I don't need to do these things. You ever said that before? Question number 5 says, what do these verses teach us about God? Those are some good questions. If you guys are in a small group or anything like that, I just encourage you guys to stop right here. Answer those 3 questions. Let's go around the room and talk about that, right? All right. We're going to move on to verses 9 through 12. If you guys would turn there with me, check these out. Verse 9 says, let the brother of humble circumstances boast in his exaltation. Verse 10, but let the rich boast in his humiliation, because he will pass away like a flower of the field. Verse 11, for the sun rises and together with the scorching wind dries up the grass. Its flower falls off and its beautiful appearance perishes. In the same way, the rich person will wither away while pursuing his activities. In verse 12, blessed is the one who endures trials, because when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life that God has promised to those who love Him. What are we talking about here? Let's dig in. Appearances can be deceiving. Hello? Anybody? Right? Like if you saw a homeless man dressed in tethered, filthy clothes sitting on the sidewalk, and then a well-dressed man, businessman, if you will, walks past to get into his expensive car, who would you think was facing a difficult trial, right? The homeless guy with nothing or the businessman with everything, right? Now, it would seem that the desperate poverty experienced by the homeless person would be far greater of a trial than anything a rich man could ever experience, right? However, at surface level glance, if you will, might not reveal the things really happening in their lives. A deeper look, at their hearts might reveal that they both experience riches related to trials. Watch. One because he has no money, and the other because he has much money. Say what? What'd you say? Listen, poverty and riches can be both be a trial. So let's look at that. At Proverbs 30, verses 8 and 9, it teaches, give me neither poverty nor wealth. Feed me with the food I need. Otherwise, I might have to much and deny you, saying, who is the Lord? Or I might have nothing and still profaning the name of my God. Now, people have basic needs, clean water, nutritious food, adequate shelter, warm clothing, that must be met to live in a healthy way, right? If these are lacking, people suffer. Yet, James commanded the poor believer to boast in his exaltation. What do the poor have to rejoice about, right? How in the world are poor folks exalted? Like, I don't get it, right? See, later James would answer in this way. Our study says, didn't God choose the poor in this way of the world to be rich in faith and heirs of the kingdom that he has promised to those who love him? And that's James 2:5. We're going to get to that. Look, when viewed through the lens of faith, poverty is a constant reminder of our dependence upon God for all. And that's all good things, right? See, if we are poor, there are nonstop opportunities to exercise faith. Wealth can also be a trial. James did not instruct the wealthy to boast in their wealth, right? Instead, the wealthy boast in humiliation. Wealth has many practical advantages, such as not needing to worry about life's basic necessities. However, earthly resources are temporary, and we will take no earthly possessions to our graves. So the rich are never to boast about what they have, because just like the grass and the flowers, their wealth will wither and pass away. See, all people have deep needs, which money can't fix. Check this out. God is a generous giver of wisdom. Remember that. He is faithful. And when we faithfully follow Him, He will give us the wisdom needed to live well through trials. Guys, the ultimate reason to celebrate for both poor and wealthy is not found in the life, this life, but in the life to come. The trials that we face in this life are temporary, and just as wealth fades, so do our problems. But faith endures. In this world, trials are going to strengthen us, right? And through faith in God, we have access to this gift of eternal life, right? Here's the last couple questions as we close our study today. What can we do? Number 6, what can we do today to prepare for trials that might come tomorrow? I heard Levi Lusko say this at Passion, I believe it was 2019. It's too late to build the storm shelter when you hear the sirens going off. If you think of a tornado siren goes off, you've got minutes, maybe seconds to get into the shelter and be protected. So if you wait until that storm, you wait until that is at your doorstep, when you have minutes to prepare for it, are you going to be ready for it? Is your faith going to be mature enough to handle that situation and respond as a believer, or react like someone of the world? Question number 7, how does focusing on eternity change the way you respond to trials? Something else I tell our kids here is, look at the situation that you're facing right now. Look at the situation and tell me, what does it have to do with eternity? Answer that question and then tackle it from there. Now, our last question for the study, if an unbeliever asks you why you still believe in God after a season of hardship, man, what would you say to that? How would you answer? Now, guys, look, because of Jesus, people can live with joy regardless of their circumstances. And as joy is rooted in an eternal perspective and not an earthly circumstance, right? That's the big one that we take away from today. And we live in a fallen world, so we're going to face things as believers. And as we follow Jesus, it doesn't mean that we won't face these things. We should expect to face these things. And guess what? When we do, we put our faith and trust in God, and that's going to strengthen and mature our faith. We become more like Christ every single day, right? Guys, I hope the Lord has been using this message today. I hope that He has been speaking to you, revealing things to you in our study today. Guys, remember that God has called us to live with joy, right? And to not forget that. In every single day, every step, every circumstance that we are facing, that we live with joy facing these trials. Guys, I hope that this has been helpful. Come back, join us next week as we look at faith on display, and we're talking about in our relationships. Guys, I hope this has been helpful. We'll catch you next week. Take care.